My name is TJ Walker, and welcome to this episode of Renew. Renew is a show about the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University. In the College of Forest Resources, we work to promote and enable the conservation, wise use, and management of our diverse natural resources. In our college, we have 3 academic departments, and today we're going to learn a little bit more about the Department of Forestry. Here with me today is Dr. Austin Himes. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll dive right into it. So tell me a little about yourself and how did you make your way to Mississippi State?
It was a long and arduous journey for a son of the Pacific Northwest, which I consider myself. I grew up in Oregon in a really small rural town in the middle of the forest and mountains, which is really where I got my interest in forestry and forest management to start with. I was there for college. I did my undergraduate at the University of Oregon and then my master's degree at University of Washington, and got a job working for a timber investment management organization, or what's more commonly referred to as a TIMO out there, that was headquartered out of Portland, Oregon. But I worked in a more rural part of the state doing research and management on a hybrid poplar plantation, actually. I worked there for about 8 years, and in the last 3 years that I was there, I was concurrently getting my PhD at Oregon State University. And the forest asset that I worked on for Greenwood Resources, I actually managed it at that time, but it was being sold. And so my position was kind of coming to an end, and I wasn't sure where I was going to be with the company after that. So I had started applying for jobs, and just having recently completed my PhD, was very interested in making the transition from private sector into academia. And there happened to be an opportunity at Mississippi State at the same time. I came down here for an interview in, I think, November or December. It was a really good fit. I was really impressed with the department and the people in the department and the way that everybody got along and collaborated together. And it seemed like a natural fit. So when I got the offer, we moved down a few months later in February 2020, just before COVID hit, which was an interesting time to move to Starkville, Mississippi from Oregon.
Interesting to say the least. Well, we're so glad to have you here. So you are on the faculty, and so you teach classes, right?
Yes.
So how many classes do you teach, and what are those classes?
So it varies a little bit from year to year.
Okay.
Going back to when I started, the first class I taught was dendrology,
Okay.
which for those of you who don't know is tree identification. Coming from Oregon, I'd seen or knew maybe of the 3 of the tree species that you'll find in Mississippi of the 320 odd woody species. And so I had to learn how to identify and then teach students how to identify about 100 different woody species that I didn't know at all when I first came down here. I since then no longer teach that class. I've shifted to teaching forest ecology, which is an undergraduate class all of our forestry majors have to take. I teach our undergraduates their capstone project-based class. We call it professional practices. They develop a management plan for landowners in one of the neighboring counties. And then I have a couple graduate classes I teach also around civiculture.
So do you have a favorite class?
Forest ecology is my favorite undergraduate class for sure. On the graduate side, I really enjoy teaching both the graduate classes that I teach.
Nice. So you mentioned forest ecology, and I also know that you have research interests in silviculture.
That's right.
And so what's the difference? Like, what are those 2 topics, and are there differences in the 2?
Yeah, they're very closely related. So often when we talk about civiculture, we'll refer to it as applied forest ecology. Okay. Whereas forest ecology is the study of sort of all the organisms within a forest that make up that ecosystem and the way they interact with the abiotic components of the environment, like the soil and the water and the atmosphere. Okay. What civiculture is how we take that knowledge of forest ecology and the way that those different parts of the system interact with each other, and we manipulate those components, particularly through the way we manipulate or change forest structure by thinning or harvesting or planting or pruning. And do that in a way based on our knowledge of forest ecology to get the outcomes we want, whether it's timber production or habitat for wildlife or other ecosystem services.
So thinking about the problems that you're solving with that research, who cares about that? Like, who does that matter to?
Well, lots of people, I hope. I think it should be important to anybody who values the forest and in lots of different ways.
Okay.
So that includes a lot of the people and organizations who support our college from in sort of industrial aspects, so large private forest land managers, timber mills, as well as small private forest landowners, which actually make up the majority of the forest land in the state of Mississippi, is owned by small private landowners under 2,000 acres. But also other people who enjoy or find less tangible benefits from the forest, whether it's driving by the forested lands in the state of Mississippi or elsewhere and enjoying that presence, or going down an Oxabee and being in the forest. In all those cases, there's things we can do with civiculture or understandings of forest ecology that can help protect or improve those diverse values and benefits that people get from the forest.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I asked that question because on the show, I typically send messages to parents and students who may be watching the show. And so if a student or parent is watching, I want them to understand what they could do with the career in silviculture or forest ecology. So thank you for clarifying that. I see you published an article in 2022 with some other co-authors about Triad Forestry.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of that paper? And tell me more about Triad Forestry.
Sure thing. Triad is a name to a concept of managing forests at sort of the landscape level. Okay. So think like big areas. It was first proposed in the early 90s. Okay. And what it is that you take a forested landscape and instead of focusing on either just production of timber and maybe protecting some areas for other values or for wildlife habitat, you segregate that landscape or split it up into different zones. One zone where you do intensive management focused on timber production. Part of the landscape then in a different zone is put into ecological reserves, similar to what we think about as like wilderness or national forests. And then part of that in between to sort of buffer those reserves from that intensive management and also provide multiple benefits besides just timber, you manage what we call ecologically or through ecological forest management. And it's a little bit less intensive, so you don't produce as much timber, but you also manage in a way that you try to support more habitat and more aesthetic values and keep the forest under more continuous cover so that it's enjoyable for recreation and other uses as well.
Gotcha. Totally makes sense. I see that you authored another paper. You've authored several. I couldn't talk about all of them, but I picked two to point out today. So you co-authored a paper about hurricane disturbances on longleaf pines. Tell me more.
Yeah, this was a paper that was actually led by a graduate student of mine who recently finished up his master's degree. And it was a collaboration with some researchers from the Jones Center at Itchway, who's a great partner to the college. We have a lot of grad students that are funded both through the department or the college and through the Jones Center that do projects there, and then we help out with our expertise. And this was one of those cases, looking at the impacts of hurricanes and how that affects the gap formation or changes in forest cover in these longleaf pine systems near the Gulf Coast. And one of the reasons that we were interested in looking at this was because in those areas like in Triad that are managed under more ecological forest management, oftentimes to guide that type of management, we look towards the sorts of openings that are made by natural disturbances and try to emulate those when we do forest harvests or forest thinning. Gotcha. And so this paper was looking at the shape and the size of the gaps that develop after hurricanes as possibly a way to inform the type of management we would do under an ecological forest management approach.
Makes sense. Okay. So you mentioned doing this research with students. And so what I've heard from you today and what I hear from all of the faculty members that I meet with on the show is that there are lots of opportunities for undergraduate research, graduate level research, students who want to go on and get their PhD. Is it safe to say that there are lots of opportunities within the Department of Forestry also?
There are lots of opportunities. Any given year, we're probably bringing on 7 to 15 new graduate students that are funded through assistantships. Those usually go through open calls. Anybody can apply for them. We'd actually like to see more applicants from the region who who are interested in coming here and doing research around forestry. And you don't necessarily have to have an undergraduate degree in forestry or natural resources related field to do that. If you have a solid foundation in economics or biological sciences, those are skills that are directly applicable to a lot of the research that we do.
Noted. And I know you and I have been in conversations about a project that's underway right now. Morgan and I will be traveling to Chicago, Illinois to attend the Manners Conference, and we're going to be sharing information about this program that you have in place now to recruit graduate students.
That's right. We were fortunate for actually the second year in a row to receive an award from the Mississippi State University Graduate School to improve our recruiting for graduate students. And in our application, instead of just looking for funds to help support and encourage recruitment of new students, we specifically highlighted opportunities where we could synergize those funds to meet other goals that we have in the department and the college, which is to increase the diversity of our student body to more accurately reflect society abroad, and particularly in the state of Mississippi, which means doing direct outreach through Manners, and we're planning some visits to go to a few HBCUs in the region too, and talk to juniors and seniors, and hopefully recruit future graduate students to our department.
Gotcha. Last question. When people hear the College of Forest Resources, or they hear the term forestry, or they see photos of students in hard hats and vests around a bunch of loblolly pine trees, they automatically assume Granddaddy's pulpwood truck.
Right, right.
What would be your comment to those misperceptions about the field?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, that absolutely that is a very important component of what we do in the department, is provide expertise to manage sustainably pine plantations and things like that. But it's only a very small portion of what we do in reality. Where our research is really focused is thinking about forests in the broadest context and the benefits that they provide to people, and how we can minimize trade-offs between those different benefits. So how we can do things like have enough timber to supply the demand that a growing global population has, while also protecting recreational values and wildlife values. And we can manage forest land and help instruct through research and through outreach and extension other landowners to manage their land for things like improved hunting, improved wildlife, improved aesthetics, or water quality in the region, not just timber. And as we go into the 21st century and we face challenges with climate change and things like that, really a lot of our research is becoming more and more focused on things besides timber. Because for the last 100 years we've been doing research now. We've got a pretty good idea how to grow loblolly pine really well and really fast. And now we have to catch up on some of these other aspects. And that's what we need foresters to be able to do in the 21st century.
Noted. Well, Dr. Himes, I've enjoyed our conversation, but we are out of time. We thank you all for joining us for this episode of Renew. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.